This video is going to cover the topic of the multiplying decimals algorithm. Be sure that the date and topic are at the top of your page. We also have, of course, an essential question. And that question is, what algorithm can we use to find the product of decimals? The first thing we'll want to be sure is that we know the standard algorithm for multiplying. This should be something you've learned previously. The good news is, if you already know how to use this algorithm, then multiplying decimals will be a natural progression. So let's review. Let's say I want to multiply 25 by 9 using the standard algorithm. The first thing I would do is multiply 9 times 5, and 9 times 5 is 45. So I'm going to put the 5 right here, and I'm going to put the 4 above the 2, the 4 in the tens place. The next thing I'll do then is multiply the 9 times 2. 9 times 2 is 18, but I still have these 4 up here, so it becomes 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And I'll go ahead and put that down here, 22. Sorry about that. So the answer to 25 times 9 is 225. Right? And that's how we use our standard algorithm. I use the same algorithm, for example, if I want to do 25 times 19, instead of just 9, I've added 10, right? I've put something in the tens place here by making it 19. And to do this, I have to be sure of one more thing, and this is something that I see people make mistakes on with frequency. It happens quite a bit. So I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to do my 9 times 5 is 45 and carry my 4. My 9 times 2 is 18, plus 4 is 22, right? So far I have the same value. I have 225, and that's because I have 9 times 25. That's the first thing I did. But now I need to deal with this 1 over here, because I'm not multiplying it by 19. I'm multiplying it by, I'm not multiplying by 9, I'm multiplying by 19. So I have to deal with the 10 in the tens place, that 1 there. Because I'm moving over a place value, I'm going to account for that in my algorithm by going down to the next line and placing a 0. I'm not using the ones column anymore. I'm jumping right to the tens column, the second line. Then I'm going to do 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I have everything I need, and I'm going to put those two parts together to get my final answer of 475. And that's something you'll hear me talk about a lot as we're working on this, that place value 0, just because it is such a common thing for people to forget about. So you're going to hear me repeating on that a lot as we work with this. We use the exact same algorithm for multiplying decimals. So let's take a look at that. So let's say this time we want to multiply 2.5 by 9. It looks a lot like when we did 25 by 9, right? Except for, of course, this is a different value. It's 2.5 instead of 25. But I've set it up the same. I put the longer number on top for ease sake, and unlike adding or subtracting, I do not need to line up the place value. Right? I've written that over here because I want to emphasize that. That's a big difference between adding, subtracting, and multiplying. So I'm just going to do this like I did before. I'm going to multiply as I did before. So I'm going to do my 9 times 5 is 45, carry my 4. 9 times 2 is 18, plus those 4 makes 22. So it looks like my answer is 225 again. Now, I know that can't be right? First of all, that's the answer to 25 times 9, which is not what we did. But second of all, if I'm estimating, as I always do when I'm multiplying decimals, 2.5 is really close to 3, and 3 times 9 would be 27. So I know that I'm really off base if an answer is 225, right? That should be a warning sign that something is wrong. So I need to figure out what I need to change here. So here's the trick that we use when we're multiplying decimals. There's a decimal place here, and there's one number behind the decimal place. I'm going to go ahead and write that there so I don't forget. The number 9 does not have a decimal. There's no number behind a decimal, so I'm just going to put a 0 here. I have one number behind a decimal in one of my factors, and I don't have any in the other, so I have a total of one number behind a decimal. That means I need one number behind the decimal in the product. So I'm going to move this over one space. My answer is 22 and a half. That makes much more sense. It's much closer to my estimate of 27, right? And I was able to use my same algorithm. I just had to readjust and put my decimal in place when I was done. Let's try another. Here I have 1 7/10 times 1 1/2, 1 5/10. I have a couple things to think about, of course. One of which is the decimals. But I also have to think about a placeholder because I have 2 digits here, which means I'm going to have to deal with that as I'm using my algorithm. So let me go ahead and work through this. I'm going to start by doing my 5. I'm going to work with my 5. I'm going to do 5 times 7, which is 35. I'm going to put the 5 down and carry the 3. Then I'm going to do 5 times 1, which is 5, plus the 3 makes 8. So I've done the first part of my algorithm. Now I want to deal with my 1. Because I've moved over a place value in my number here, in my factor, I'm going to go down a line and put a 0 here to put the place value. I'm no longer looking at that place. I'm moving over to the left. Now I'm going to do 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 1 is 1. I'm going to put those all together. And I get 255. Obviously that seems really off base, right? Because 1 7/10 is close to 2, as is 1 1/2, right? So my answer is going to be no more than 4. 225 is really far away. So I'm going to do my decimal trick here. There's one number behind the decimal here, one number behind the decimal here, which means all together I should have 2 numbers behind a decimal in my product. So I'm going to start on the left. I'm going to go once, twice. My answer should be 2 55 hundredths. That's much more reasonable. We're going to practice this a lot in class, of course, but let's just do one more practice where you try it, and then we'll see how you do. So for your turn, I'd like you to try 2 3/10 times 7/10. And I want you to multiply as best you can with that standard algorithm and then determine where you think the decimal goes for the final product, the final answer that you have. And remember, the essential question was, what algorithm can we use for multiplying decimals? And so hopefully this gave you a good idea of how we do that, but of course we'll be practicing it together.